Hello, I'm Shoestring Jane. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things thrifty, frugal and money saving. And today I'm going back to a subject that I looked at a couple of weeks ago, which is saving money on food and how we're keeping our food bills low. Because I am quite sure that you have noticed wherever you are that the price of food is definitely on the increase. And if you're already on a tight budget, then you really need to be looking as much as you can anyway on ways to save money. So I did do this, I addressed this as I say in a video which I will link below, which had some kind of obvious to me things, some of the first things that I would do when I'm trying to save money on my groceries. But I have thought of a few more things, so I thought I would do a kind of part two and have a look at a few more ideas that you perhaps maybe haven't thought of yet to save money. And so I'll link that original one below. So the first thing, and this is something I am not necessarily an expert on or very good at myself. I've got a lot better at it lately. I've done a few videos on this as well, which is to keep your food storage areas organised. So that's your fridge, your freezer, any cupboards where you keep food. Keep it organised so that you know what you've got. And this is particularly the case I find with the freezer, because it's so easy to get bargains, shove them to the back of the freezer and then pile more stuff on top, and then you forget what's there. So it's really important to keep on top of what you've got so that when you come to do your meal plan and write your shopping list, you know what you already have. So you start with what you've got already, which means you have to buy less and things don't go off. I know they don't really go off in the freezer, but they do spoil, and certainly in the fridge, you know, if you're not keeping on top of what's in there, then things can go bad and you end up throwing them away. And if you're trying to save money on your food bill, the last thing you want to do is waste food. So keep all of those storage areas really organised, know what's in them, do regular stock takes, if you like, and circulate the things, bring the things to the front that need using up first, and make sure that you're not wasting anything. So that's the first thing I would say. And another thing I find that's really useful to get into the habit of doing is to really notice how much each item costs when you buy it. Because if you don't, how do you know when you're getting a bargain? Or how do you know when there's been an increase if you don't really notice? I mean, for years ago, I just used to, I thought, well, I needed that, I need that, I need that, and I'd just shove them in the basket. And I might think, oh, well, actually that branded one is a bit more expensive than the supermarket one, and go for the supermarket own brand. But I wouldn't necessarily really focus on what things were costing individually. So then I wouldn't also know if certain items were much cheaper in a different supermarket or a different place, or, you know, when so-called offers arrive, whether they were really, really good offers, or, you know, I said before in my last video, you can see these kind of bug off type things, buy one, get one free. But when you look into them, sometimes they are only on branded items. And if you got the supermarket own, even without the bug off offer, it would be cheaper. It's hard to really judge those if you don't know the price of things. I mean, years ago, I did used to keep a price book. I don't think there would be a lot of value in that, because prices are changing too rapidly, really, for you to confidently say, oh, well, this costs this much in Asda and that much in Sainsbury's and that much in Aldi. So things are just changing too much. But what I tend to do when I'm doing my Aldi or Lidl hauls for this is that I write down the cost of the item on the packet with an indelible ink. And actually that's a really useful thing to do to help you get to know the prices. You'll be familiar with them. And also when you're working out the cost of a recipe, say you were using so much rice or so much pasta, you'd be able to work out the cost of that so that you can actually see how much your favourite recipes are costing you, and think about whether actually they're quite expensive. Maybe I could swap down to a different type of recipe that's not going to be so expensive. So it's useful in that respect as well. So just really notice what things cost. Perhaps make a note of them when you get home, perhaps write them on the packaging. It's quite useful to do that. Sometimes it's really good to get some inspiration when you're looking to make frugal food. So it's really worth checking out certain writers and YouTubers and cookery books, just to see just get some inspiration, really. I don't slavishly always stick to a recipe, but there are certain books and writers that I will go back to again and again. The obvious one, if you're on a frugal path, you will know Jack Munro. The Bootstrap Cook website is brilliant. It's got so many good frugal recipes on it, so really check that out. But there's also some you might not know. Lorna Cooper has had 2 or 3 really good recent cookbooks that are worth looking out for. She also has a Facebook group. I think it's Feed Yourself for 20 quid a week, Feed Your Family for 20 quid a week. So it's worth looking at her. There are some classic books that if you see secondhand or in the charity shop are really worth picking up. Delia Smith's Frugal Food, for example, that was first written in the 70s when we had a massive recession, and in the UK we had the 3-day week and a real problem with energy prices going through the roof. Sound familiar? So that's really worth checking out. It has been updated. I've got actually both versions, the old one and the updated version, and I think that's a really good book. Talking of good, there was a 70s writer called Shirley Good with an E. If you ever came across any of her books, then grab them. I've got one very old one, and they're still really worth looking at. They're still good, even though some of the prices of things may have changed a little bit, some things that were cheap then and perhaps not now, and vice versa. The principles behind the way she cooks, she used to cost out all of her recipes like a restaurant would, like a professional kitchen would. So you because you're in a professional kitchen, you want to make sure you're getting a profit, don't you? So in this case, costing them out made you see, as I mentioned before, what's really cheap, what is a really cheap recipe. So Shirley Good, I mean, she's dead now, sadly, but I think her family keep her website going. So if I find that, I will link it below. Look at wartime recipe sites. If you find any of those or any old wartime books, then they are really worth checking out, because, our grandmothers and great-grandmothers had to make food from very little during rationing after the Second World War. And they improvised in very clever ways, and we had a really good government at that point and a good Ministry of Food, and they sent out lots of pamphlets advising housewives. At the time it would have only been the housewives that did the cooking, how to stretch their rations and how to use other things, and how to grow their own and use some of their own food from the garden and that kind of thing. So that's worth looking at as well. There are some good Facebook groups. There's Thrifty Leslie has a good blog with some really good ideas on there, so check her out. But she also has a Facebook group which is worth joining. I have my own Facebook group which is called My Secondhand Frugal Life, and there are some brilliant ideas on there, not from me, I hasten to say, but from some of the members, of really good ideas on all kinds of diets, including keto and that kind of thing. There are some really good things in there. And then one other recommendation that I must make is Frugal Queen in France, Jane, who does weekly brilliant cooking videos. So if you're not always already subscribed to Jane, then I would recommend you get on over and have a look at what she's making. I was looking at one of hers this morning, and she was doing some great batch cooking, and she made a load of cottage pies, really stretched her minced beef, and also some lasagnas, all from the same minced beef, and it all looked delicious. So she's a great source of inspiration when it comes to food. So that's my recommendation. Really have a look at some of those older writers and have a look at some new frugal inspiration on YouTube and Instagram and anywhere else, really. And it would be really helpful as well, I would say, is if you do have any frugal food writers or YouTubers, please do recommend them in the comments below so that we can share that knowledge. That would be really good. And a word about pulses, because I can't eat a lot of pulses personally, but I really do like them, and sometimes I'll use them to stretch a meal. So rather than just having a chickpea curry, I might have a little bit of chicken and chickpea and make a curry out of it. And the chickpeas are really cheap in cans. If you wanted to make them even cheaper, you can buy them dried, soak them overnight, and if you've got a pressure cooker is the really quickest way to zap your chickpeas, or you can boil them, but you've got to think about the cost of the energy and whether that's actually going to be cheaper for you in the long run. Maybe if you did a big batch and then froze some, that would be. So pulses are really good. You can buy the really cheap value cans of baked beans and use them to pad things out. My dad always used to do that when we were kids. He'd make a casserole and he would always chuck in a can of baked beans. So sometimes I think Dad just stopped with the baked beans already, put something else in there, but it did the job. It padded things out. It gave us some extra protein and fibre. You know, these things are good for you. So it's one of your 5 a day. So, you know, why not use those very cheap sources of protein and extend the meat rations that you're doing? So you can look at all kinds of things: lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, mung beans, you know, whatever you can find really you can use. And lentils are good, red and green, because they don't require any soaking and they cook relatively quickly. So it's always worth keeping a packet. I like red lentils. It's really nice for thickening soups and stews. So that's really worth looking at as well. So really think about that. And then moving on from that, I did mention in my last video eating perhaps less meat and cheaper cuts of meat, but you could also introduce maybe meat-free Mondays. There is a whole website, I think it was started by Paul and Linda McCartney, meat-free Mondays. I will link that below as well, but it's easy enough to find on Google. And there's lots of vegetarian recipes on there. So you could say, well, if your family are real carnivores and they don't really want to go vegetarian or eat less meat, but you could just say, no, let's do a new meat-free Monday and introduce them to the concept of eating vegetarian food. And then you could maybe have a meat-free Thursday, whatever, you know, you could have a couple of days a week where you don't have meat, and that will be cheaper. Meat is definitely your more expensive ingredient when it comes to it. So that's worth looking at as well. And then the other thing you can do, and this has come up a lot on my Facebook group recently, is cooking without your oven. So there are other things that you may have already in your house that will cook more quickly and therefore use less energy and therefore be cheaper. The obvious thing is your microwave, and microwaves aren't great for everything. You won't get a nice brown top, but you could perhaps semi-cook some jacket potatoes in your microwave so that they're soft and then crisp them off in the oven. I don't like jacket potatoes just done in the microwave. I don't think they are jacket potatoes, they're just steamed potatoes, aren't they? So that's not something I like, but I will sometimes do that. Just do almost cook them in your microwave, takes about 5 minutes, and then finish them off for another 10 in your oven. And then make sure the oven is full. So try not to do just one thing in your oven if you are going to use it. But then think about what else you may have. For example, I have an air fryer. I have a slow cooker. Some people have those Ramoska, I think they're called, cookers. They're going to be cheaper to run than filling, especially if you're doing one thing. With the air fryer, it's much easier to do. If you're going to do one thing that takes you half an hour in your oven, you could probably do that in 15 or 20 minutes in your air fryer, and therefore it takes less time. Can you grill instead of putting into the oven? Can you fry? And you might find, you know, things are quite often quicker if you fry them rather than baking them. So what else do I want to say about that? Halogen ovens was the other thing. I've never used one myself, but a lot of people on my Facebook group do use halogen ovens and find them quite useful. So if you've got one, use that. Slow cookers, as I said before, slow cookers are so brilliant because they literally cost, I think it's like the cost of a light bulb, just a low wattage light bulb, to keep your slow cooker going, and you can do really nice stews and casseroles. People do all sorts of things in there. I'm not very adventurous with my slow cooker. I do tend to do stews and things like that, but you can do all sorts. You get yourself a good slow cooker book out of the library and make better use of it. I should do that too. If you have a little garden or a little patch of land, can you grow some of your own food? If you don't have anywhere to grow anything, how about some microgreens on the windowsill or some herbs? I do say this as somebody who hasn't properly grown anything in the garden for 2 years now. It definitely saves you money, but you have to grow a lot to really feel the difference in your food bill. But it's worth just starting with some, you know, bits and pieces. Salads, keep salads going all summer. You can grow courgettes, they're very easy. Tomatoes. You don't need a lot of knowledge and know-how and experience to grow just a few bits to get your confidence up. But it does take time to do a whole vegetable garden, and that's one thing I would say that we decided to move away from, because, you know, it does save us money, but we don't have time to really give it everything we should do. If you are interested in doing that though, please check out What Vivi Did Next on YouTube, because she grows pretty much all of her own food. I mean, considering she lives in a flat in London, but she has an allotment, she grows an awful lot of her own food and lives on very little money as a consequence. So if you wanted to make a job of it, then you could do that. And there are other really good YouTube channels. Mossy Bottom I like as well. It's a chap who lives in Ireland. He's got a small holding, but he's gone the whole hog, and he really is pretty much self-sufficient. So, you know, maybe you do want to do that, but if you want that kind of inspiration, he's worth going to. But if we're looking at just saving money on food, generally use a lot of herbs, grow your own herbs. If you just want some fruit, it's nice to get some fruit bushes in the garden. And then once you've done those, they're there every year. We have some great black currants and red currants because we did that 4 or 5 years ago, and we get a good crop every year. And I make jellies and we put them in crumbles, and I use them for breakfast on my porridge and that kind of thing. And that does save us quite a lot of money on fruit. So in part one of this subject area on saving money on groceries, I did mention shopping in different places and maybe looking at Lidl and Aldi instead of Sainsbury's and Tesco's and wherever else you shop. But I didn't really mention markets. If you're lucky enough to have a really good market in your town, then buying your fruit and vegetables on the market is nearly always much cheaper than getting it from the supermarket. So if it's somewhere you go anyway, if you have to go into town to work, or you know you go into town regularly for other reasons, then I would check out your market. We don't have a brilliant one here, but it's all right. But what I find is good in the summer is if I'm off to the boot sale anyway, I'll quite often shop the fruit and veg stalls at the boot sales, and they are much cheaper than the supermarkets. You get big bowls of things for £1 and that kind of thing. So definitely worth checking those out. And the other thing I should mention is Approved Food, and there are other organisations like Approved Food who sell goods, not fresh goods so much, but more canned goods and dried goods like pasta and rice and that kind of thing towards the end of their shelf life. Now they are not off, they won't go off. They're coming towards their best before date, but their best before that is very arbitrary. They'll be fine probably for a couple of years later. I've bought massive catering sized cans of vegetable stock before, which lasted us years, and it was towards the end of the date, and honestly it was fine right to the end. I've bought big things of pasta and rice. What else have I bought on Approved Food? I tend to avoid the snacks and chocolates and convenience foods, but if you need to use those, that's a really good place to buy it. You do have to bear in mind, I think it's a £5 delivery charge. Bear that in mind and get as much as you can to make that worthwhile, or share it with a friend or family member or a neighbour. Share the cost. It's worth looking at that. If you've got children and you do know you're going to end up buying bags of crisps and snacks and things like that, then why not get them from Approved Food? It's really worth it. I will put my referral link below as well. So I do get I think I get a small reward if you make an order through my referral link. So it's worth considering anyway. But it's also good if, you know, I go on about scratch cooking, but when I worked full time and I had 3 children at home, just scratch cooking all the time was just too exhausting. I'll come home from work and just be really tired. And to be honest, having a jar of bolognese sauce or a chicken tonight or something like that in the larder was a godsend. And those are the kind of things I used to look out for on Approved Food, because you can get things like that you know are going to be just useful to have at the back of your cupboard. They do last a long time. So take no notice of that best before date. And, you know, I don't think that you should beat yourself up if you don't have time to scratch cook every night. It's worth looking at those kind of things, or looking at the value brands. But honestly, I don't always like the value brands of those kind of convenience foods. So see what you think. It's worth trying out Approved Food as well. And I would say something about buying canned and frozen fruit, vegetables, and actually meat as well, and fish. It is cheaper generally to buy frozen vegetables, particularly if you go for the supermarket own brands. It's also really good if you're a small family, or if you're just a couple, or if you live by yourself. It's much better if you could buy a whole cabbage, but are you going to eat a whole cabbage before it goes off? So if you can buy things frozen, you can just use what you need, so you don't waste as much potentially. So it's worth looking at frozen or canned vegetables and fruits. I always buy frozen berries. We've got the red currants I mentioned earlier in the garden, but by themselves they're quite tart, so I tend to mix them up with some sweeter fruit, which I'll buy from Aldi usually, from the frozen section, or Lidl. It's still an expense, but you know, if I mix it with our homegrown stuff, it's not too bad, and it's cheaper than buying fresh. And one thing about things like soft fruits like raspberries and strawberries and blackberries is that when you buy those fresh, you have to eat them really quickly, because they do tend to get that kind of mold on it if you've got any heat, if it's hot weather as well. So it's worth thinking about buying them frozen or canned. Fish, I use a lot of canned fish, and I always buy frozen fish because it is much cheaper than the fresh fish, and I really do like fish, but it's just too expensive, so I'm not going to buy really lovely fresh fish unless it's on offer. So if it's on yellow sticker, then obviously I will buy it. Somebody on the Facebook group, Mickey, bought a lot of canned ham. It was like Polish or Eastern European from Asda, at £1 a can. If you can pick up things like that, although that's not my favourite, it could be used in lots of different recipes, so you don't have to eat it as it is. It's like kind of luncheon meat, I think you would call it, or spam type thing. If you can pick up things like that, it's worth buying those to have in your store cupboard. That's much cheaper than buying fresh ham. So I wouldn't be too snooty about trying things like that. And that's also the kind of thing you might pick up on approved food. What else did I want to say? Oh yes, I mentioned yellow stickers. Yellow stickers, some people really live on them. I couldn't live on them. I don't always want things that are yellow stickered, but sometimes if you go at the right time, Asda's a good one, sort of last thing on a Sunday afternoon. Morrison's seemed to be good on a Monday morning for us for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. But you can get some really good bargains that are reduced and yellow stickered. So if you go at the right times, you can buy a lot of that kind of stuff. And if anybody knows Mean Queen, she has a blog and she has a YouTube channel. She eats a lot of yellow stickered food, and she pretty much ignores the use by dates on lots of them, and she's still here. She's looking pretty healthy on it, so I think some of those can be taken with a pinch of salt as well. Although, you know, use your nose, use your senses. If it smells bad, it's probably bad. I wouldn't just keep eating something. But then I would also not throw a pot of hummus away if it was 2 days out of date, if it tasted fine and smelt fine. So it's worth looking at those kind of things as well. What else did I want to say? Oh, find coupons. So sometimes coupons are good. So if you use a particular brand, if you know you really like branded things, I mean, I did say in my last video, don't be a brand snob, and I would still say that, but if there's certain things that you think, oh, we really do like this brand, then look out for coupons. It's always worth looking at your supermarket websites before you go to see if they've got any special offers on, if they've got any coupons on, looking if you get club card vouchers, you know, seeing if there's something you will use. The Co-op does some good vouchers and coupons that come through the doors as well, so it's worth sometimes looking at those. I know that some people live from coupons, and if you check out Jordan Cox, he's the coupon kid, he wrote a whole book on it. He is an expert on UK couponing. I know it's a whole new ball game in the US. We just don't have those kind of good coupons in the UK as far as I can tell. But there are apps now like ShopMe, and there are lots of others, I'm sure you'll tell me in the comments, where you can get things for free, or you can get big reductions on items as well. So it's worth exploring those. I have to say, I don't use them much myself because I go to Lidl and Aldi nearly all of the time. I know what I want to buy. I don't buy a lot of branded stuff, so they're not really a lot of good to me. And I also don't want to go into a supermarket to get a free product from ShopMe, and I want to just go and get the one product. I don't want to buy anything else. It doesn't seem worth the journey. So I tend not to use them. But if you're going in there anyway, it's worth exploring them. Drink more water. That's the other thing. Oh, I'm trying to drink more water. I've got some here. If you drink a lot of squash or fizzy drinks, cans of cola, that kind of thing, swap them out and try to encourage your family and yourself to drink more water. Personally, I do it because I drink too much tea. So I spend all my life on the loo, and if I drink water, then it's much better. So I'm trying to drink more water. It's really good for you. It's really good for your skin, for your bones. It's good for your discs. I've had some disc problems in the past. I was recommended to drink a lot of water because it plumps up your discs. So it's worth drinking lots of water. Most of us are really more dehydrated than we should be. It's okay to drink other drinks as well. That will hydrate you in the same way, but it's the expense. So rather than drinking lots of squash, drinking lots of fizzy drinks and drinking lots of tea and coffee. Try to drink more water. I live in East Anglia, and the water here is quite heavily chlorinated, and you can, when you first pour it out of the tap, sometimes you can smell and taste the chlorine. So what I find is if I pour a jug out and just either leave it on the side with the lid on, or I put it in the fridge for a while, that chlorinated taste and smell just dissipates, it goes. So you don't necessarily have to filter it, but if you want to, you can. I would not go for bottled water instead. That's probably just as expensive, plus you've got all the plastic waste. So if you're somebody who really likes drinking bottled water, I would suggest that maybe a filter is better for you. So that's another thing. Drink more water, it's cheaper. So that's all of the ideas in part 2 of my ways to get your food more cheaply. Did I mention Olio? I don't think I mentioned Olio. Let's add that one. If you haven't got the Olio app, then do download the Olio app. It's brilliant. You can get food for free. Supermarkets and wholesalers and individuals as well sometimes have food that they're not going to use before its best before date, and they will give it away for free on the Olio app. You also have food pantries in some towns and cities. So food pantries, if you've got one of those, it's worth Googling food pantry and in your local area to see if you've got one. Again, it's the same principle. Quite often you'll get certain supermarkets, I think Marks and Spencer's gives away a lot to the one near my parents' house, and you'll find bread and vegetables and occasionally produce like dairy produce and things like that in there as well. So it's worth looking to see if you've got a food pantry. But Olio is really the good one. Too Good To Go is another app, but it's not for free. It's £3.50 or £4.50 for a magic bag. And it's okay. It depends on the place. I mean, again, on my Facebook group, some people put some fantastic bargains that they've got from Too Good To Go. Morrison's does some good fruit and veg boxes and that kind of thing you'll get. So Morrison seems to be a good one. We don't have a local Morrison, so I only go in there when I'm out of town. But then there's also places like Marks and Spencer's again, and Costa do one, and there are places that do lots of sandwiches. So that's only really works if you're going to eat those sandwiches quite quickly, because otherwise, to be perfectly honest, you're better off just making your own sarnie. But if you've got kids, or you take sandwiches for lunches, then it's worth looking at places like Costa and Greggs and some of those other sandwich retails and coffee bars and cake stalls as well. You'll get cake shops that are on there, but it's worth it for that kind of thing if you're going to use them. So it's variable. They say that the magic bags have to contain foods worth at least £12. I've seen some not very good ones, but they still probably were worth £12, and I've seen some brilliant ones. It's very variable. You can hop over to my Facebook group, My Secondhand and Frugal Life, if you want to see some examples. Yes, nearly forgot that one. So that's all I can think of for now, ways to save money on your food. It is a pressing subject for many of us at the moment. Everything's going through the roof. If we can save money here and there, it can really make a difference and keep us debt-free. Anyway, if you enjoy this sort of content, don't forget to subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, give me the thumbs up and hit your notifications bell so that you know next time I'm about to publish a video. And I will see you next time. Bye for now. Keep saving money.